take you through. I understand we have people here around this digital table from Italy to Denmark, from Greece to Poland. And of course, it's very exciting for me to talk to this kind of audience. You are all interested in the Belgian market. Some of you are interested to participate in Tavala, the exhibition which Mieke mentioned, to participate or to visit. And what I would like to do today with you is to take you through that Belgian market, which is a small country, but definitely offers a lot of opportunities. And it's not for net that the Belgian food industry calls itself under the name food.be, small country, great food. Belgium is a food country. Now, in order to be successful in any international market, as now Belgium or, as I said, any international market, it's very important you do your homework. Because at the end of the day, for you, the last thing, what everybody wants in the end, is to make sales, to be successful. And therefore, if you want to enter a market, if you want to have those, if somebody wants to be successful in the market, you need to do your homework, and that means understand the market and understand what your competitive environment is, what your competition is. Today, I will focus predominantly on the market, but as Mieke said, this webinar is aimed at you. You will have questions. Feel free to use the time to use, let's say, our know-how, which I want to share, and ask the questions if your questions are not answered. A quick resume of what Green Seed Group is all about. Mieke kindly introduced it, and I can't add that much more. 12 offices over more than 20 markets. What is important to know, we only do food and drink. So our specialization is to assist companies from small SMEs to the larger ones to enter or to develop their international business. That's what we do day in, day out. That's our DNA, I would say. How we do that, and that presentation is available to you, so I'm not going to take you through all the details, but at the end of the day, it comes down to building a strategy for your client, for our clients, you as a business, how to enter the market, avoid the pitfalls, introduce you to the possible clients being an importer or a trade partner, and as such try to tailor a solution for you, because we can of course say what is needed for the industry, but at the end of the day each company has its own specific questions which we need to try to answer. How do we do that? It is important, and it's important for anybody entering a market is to understand what the trade needs, your partner locally, what the consumer is expecting, and the question is, can you give an answer to that and come up with what I would call the USP to make a difference in the market and to hopefully start that sales process. How we do it, it's a process. As I said, doing your homework makes you need to research your market. Out of that rolls a strategy, and once that strategy is defined, it's important that you build the right story, because of your at that moment your sales starts. Is it to your importer or your agent you're working with, your local partner, or is it directly to the end customer? It is important that you come up with solutions or answers to the questions they will have. And once you're in a market, it's important you do support your product. It's not only getting your product on shelf, it's even more important to get a product afterwards off the shelf, get the rotation going, etc. And that is for anybody, for a small company to a large company. That's the essence of any business, but that's not specifically for Belgium, that's everywhere. And that's where we as Green Seed Group assist our clients. We have clients in all different sectors, from the brands, of course, or private labels, so the manufacturers, but we also work with regional organizations, with industry bodies, or run certain EU projects like one we've done, like Unaprol, which is for olive oil. So that's a little bit, let's say, to explain who we are and what we do, and we can always expand on that if you want, but that sets a bit the scene. Now, the objective today is Belgium. You have it shown interest or are interested in entering that Belgian market, and therefore it's important to understand what are we talking about. I will take you through the country as such, the consumer and what the latest trends are, and then focusing more and more on your end customer, hopefully, which is the retailer. How you get there, let's say the best route to market, is something we will also stop at and talk you through, because at the end of the day, it is what is the best solution for you. And the best solution could be also not to come to a market. But for that, you need to understand all the parameters and all the ins and outs of that specific market. Now, you will recognize this map. Belgium is one of the smallest countries in Europe, but that doesn't mean there are no opportunities. The contrary, it's in the center of Europe, at the heart of a lot of institutions and a mixture of cultures. So it's down to me to show you now where those opportunities could be and where that it could be of interest to you. Now, Belgium has its cliches, of course. Yes, we are the country for beer, the country of chocolate, or the fries. Unfortunately, the French stole our name, and it's not French fries, it's in fact Belgian fries, just to make that clear. But this is what Belgium has, is in the kind of general understanding for people. Now, small country means around 11-12 million inhabitants or consumers. And what is very important for you to understand is that Belgium has two main cultures. Yes, we have three regions, that's political, that's less of an issue for you. But you see that horizontal line below Brussels, that's in fact the cultural line, as I would call it. Everybody above that line speaks Dutch. Everybody below that line speaks French. And there's a mixture of the two main European cultures, the German and Latin culture, which has an impact on consumer behavior. So yes, there is the Belgian consumer, but few examples. In the north, the rate of vegetarian or plant-based food is stronger in the north than in the south. Historically, they eat more butter in the south than in the north, which is more margarine, just to highlight that there is not that one Belgian consumer. Having said that, the market is quite small, the market is quite concentrated, as you will see later on. If you start supplying the Belgian market, or a specific retailer, you will supply them nationally. It's not that you can say, my product is far more important for the French-speaking part of Belgium. I will ask Delhaize, which is a main multiple, to only sell the products in the south. It's not that simple. So you have to come up almost with a national solution, which has also an impact. So I would say, forget all the political points, that's not important. But what is important is that from a legal point of view, your packaging needs to be adapted to all the consumers. Which means that in Belgium, if you start selling your product to the national multiples, your product should be in the 3 official languages. Because I talked about the north being Flanders, the south Wallonia, there is a specific area in Belgium where people speak German. That makes German an official language, and strictly spoken, all packaging should be in Dutch, French, German if you want to enter the Belgian market. There are more subtleties to the whole story. meaning you will ask how come Albert Heijn from Holland is supplying the Belgian market with Dutch products. That's true. They're only selling in the northern part of Belgium because the law says that your product needs to be understood for the local consumer. So that is to bear in mind, but I don't want to go too much in detail. Important to know for you, you want to enter the Belgian market, make sure that from a language point of view, your products are adapted with minimum Dutch and French, and in fact German, which is needed. So facts and figures, which are more what I would call to be read afterwards. We have a small inflation still of around 3%, and the food growth you can see is below inflation of around 2.4%. So we are indeed a bit struggling at the level of buying power. Now, in Belgium, you have the national brands, the branded propositions, as well as the private label proposition. And you can see that the private label has a very important impact in Belgium. So again, there is becoming more and more of polarization in the Belgian market. On one hand, you've got the larger, bigger brands, which are quite dominant, and on the other hand, have private label, which makes it more challenging for new brands or smaller brands to enter the market. It's not that it's impossible, absolutely not, so don't be discouraged, but that's a fact of life. You can see across the different categories, from alcoholic beverages, their brands are far more dominant. But in fresh goods, in chilled goods, in fruit and vegetables, etc., brands are almost non-existing. So it depends a bit which category you operate. But it's important for anybody entering a market that you build your story, and that's one of the things to bear in mind. I can give you an example. We are currently occupied with a project in fruit and nuts. A very nice proposition, branded, and the reaction from the trade you got immediate first reaction is we want to do private label in this. We are not interested in a brand. So it's you as a supplier, because a lot of smaller or SMEs are not interested in doing private label. So you as a supplier need to build a good story why you would or you wanted to change the overall opinion of the retailer. Here you can see also the growth, the trend of the last few years, and as in fact an impact also of the crisis and the price inflation which we've seen over the last few years, but that's quite detailed. Now, looking at that consumer, so it's down to you to come up with a proposition which will seduce, if I can call it like that Belgian consumer. Do you have a proposition which appeals to that Belgian shopper? Do you have something which is different? Because at the end of the day, if you come with a product which is number 25 on the market, your chances of success will be limited. Having said that, a lot of producers, and I'm sure amongst the audience today, there are many who have that kind of innovation within the business, is to define a good USP to make you stand out and come up with something which the market is definitely interested in. Now, what I'm saying here is not specifically new. We have seen quite a lot of trends across Europe, including Belgium. And I think those trends have shown a major evolution in food consumption, and it's changing all the time, and it's continuing all the time. What do we see as major trends? I think you can regroup them across a few topics. Healthy eating. Healthy eating is definitely a hot topic, and that is reflected in a number of things. Consumers are interested to understand what they eat. Consumers are interested for as much as possible for clean labels, limited additives, limited nasties in a product. Food as medicine can also be related to that. And the high protein is, for example, a hot item at the moment. More fibers, more vitamins in your product. All again, it is a very conscious consumer. But there are other things which are important. Local, this is predominantly a result of the COVID, that people want to eat more local, and that's predominantly in the fresh product area. People want to eat authentic food. People are not next to the health. That's another very important thing, is the whole environmental and sustainability study. A trend, people want to make sure that the climate, and of course this is a bit of a dilemma. On one hand, there is that consumer is far more conscious about it. From where is my product coming to? Has it traveled a lot? Is there a lot of plastic around it? So people are concerned about that. That's also driven by the retailers. So there's a kind of a parallel movement. But having said that, the moment we have a kind of an economic crisis, or there is a pressure on the buying power, people start shifting again. So sustainability has also its limits. At the end of the day, at a certain point in time, price comes into play as well. So that is something to bear in mind. And then on the, let's say, more IT level, home deliveries, online sales are less important than in many other countries in Europe, definitely compared to Scandinavia or the UK, for example. But they are there and it's growing, including the offer of menu boxes like the HelloFresh of this world, so which are ready to cook, not ready to eat, but ready to cook. And what is not to be forgotten, and that's probably less my generation, of course, but is that the new generation of shoppers is very much influenced for what they see and read on the TikToks or the Instagrams of this. So when I talked earlier on about once you're on shelf, you need to get the products off shelf. If you think of marketing, promoting your products, the social media element is something which should not be ignored when doing so. The retailers, as I said earlier on, have a major impact on how they drive the consumers, how they educate partly the consumers. And there are, of the top 3 retailers, I'll explain to you later, which are Carrefour, Colruyt and Delhaize. They all have their own policy in order to play on the kind of trends. There is the Act for Food, with an emphasis on organic and local by Carrefour, whereby Colruyt, which is the middle one, they have developed an eco score. In other words, their own private label, at this moment only for their own private label. They inform the consumer on how ecologically that product has been produced or delivered. So your brand or your product, not your brand, but your product, because it's private label, your product will get an eco score, which you can find online when you consult the details of the product. And maybe the most important one, the most impactful one, is what Delhaize is very much focused on, the Nutri-Score. Nutri-Score, or the kind of traffic light system in the UK, is based on the calculation to rate your product from A till D, A very healthy, E very rather unhealthy. The Nutri-Score is very well implemented in Belgium, both private label as brands. But I'm sure that is in many European countries like yours, the same case. But I can only confirm, I think Nutri-Score even started in Belgium, but it's a very impactful tier. And our advice is, it's a bit, of course, sales and marketing oriented. Look at your score. If your score is A or B, definitely use it in your, not only on your packaging, but also in your negotiations with the trade. Maybe it's a point of difference with the products currently on the market. Of course, if you're D or E, my advice is don't raise it and keep it a bit discreet. How is that shopper acting? Where does it shop? In Belgium, you could say that every household has his own dedicated supermarket. When I mean dedicated supermarket, is that the one leading supermarket where they do their weekly shopping. And that is one of the top three. The last Carrefour Colruyt, often driven by proximity. And next to that, they will start topping up. So they will go to hard discounters for some. There are some, they will top it off with hard discounters, Aldi Lidl for certain parts of the shopping. They will go for local shops for more fresh food, so the proximity. So, but everybody has got one main shop. They do the majority of their shoppings. E-commerce, I mentioned it earlier on already, is quite low compared to other markets. And it's the bricks and mortar. In other words, it's the existing top three multiples who have got an e-commerce element to it. And that's where people shop as well. And you see that predominantly the kind of younger families with kids who don't have time to spend a few hours in the supermarket in the weekend. What is also important to know is that the retail and food service is blurring. In other words, you have the traditional supermarket or retail scene where people most of the time start. On the other hand, you've got the food service element, which can give you quite some volume and interesting sales as well. And in between, there is the kind of the gray zone. Is it retail? Is it food service? Which brings me to the on the go. And there's a lot of, is it petrol forecourts, shops, where then all of a sudden is also a bakery involved. There is a sandwich bar, there is a coffee bar, there are the healthy snacks with fresh cut fruit, etc. So that's also, and that is to be questioned, is this retail, is it food service in between? But the on the go is definitely a growing segment within the Belgian market with smaller outlets. Now, prices and promotions. The Belgian consumer is prepared to pay for its food. Now, like we all know, with statistics, you can prove everything, and there is not that one consumer. There is a shopper. There's not one shopper, there are different shoppers. But in generally spoken, the Belgian consumer is prepared to pay for its shopping basket and to pay for its products and pay for quality. So overall, compared to the neighboring countries, we have food prices in store which are roughly 10% higher in cost. How come? That is a number of reasons. There are the retailers who are taking a bigger margin. Let's not be confused. Belgian retailers are taking substantially higher margins than certain other retailers in Europe. But also the supplier can sometimes achieve better buying prices than elsewhere, which makes Belgium, from that perspective, also quite interesting. We are less sensitive in terms of promotions, albeit that's changing. That has changed over the last 5 years, predominantly because of Albert Heijn entering the Belgian market with quite aggressive price policies, and the rest are following. So if the moment you enter a Belgian market, especially direct or indirect with your importer, you're talking to the retailers, you need to make sure that you build in an interesting promotional package in order to convince that buyer. So it's not only your product and your price, but it's also everything you put behind in terms of promotions and in the end even some marketing. I mentioned there, which sounds maybe very logic, but sales at loss are prohibited. Belgium is quite strict on that. To give you an example, recently there was a promotion. Albert Heijn is the one who is most disturbing the market in that context, where they offered, was it 1+3 or 2+3, buy 2 and get 3 free, or buy 1 get 3 products free, which of course is from a marketing point of view versus the consumer very attractive. There's a lot of buzz around it, including the reaction of the authorities to say this is likely not correct. So we will start analyzing this. But of course, at the same time, the message is out, and Albert Heijn positioned themselves as a very aggressive and interesting party to shop in. And less, but not very much important to know, we have 6% VAT on food. Let's look now. I dropped a few times the names Colruyt, Carrefour, Delhaize. These are the three main multiples. So let me now dive into those retailers to give you an idea of who is operating in this market, how do they organize themselves, what is the profile, and that makes it for you also a bit more easier to understand where could my product in the end end. Belgium is a very concentrated market, with the top three multiples being the Colruyt Group. I'll come to that later, what that means. Ahold, Delhaize, and Carrefour Group. We are talking about around 64-65% of the market. So almost 2/3 of the market is handled by three multiples. No, three multiple groups, I would say. But that means also that with, roughly speaking, around 5 depots, you can have a distribution in 2/3 of the Belgian market. On top of that, you've got hard discounters Aldi and Lidl, which together a small 20%. So in order to be successful in the Belgian market, it is clear you need to score in one of the top 5. When I say that, it could be a bit blunt, but if you develop an international sales, you need to choose, do you want to develop a real sales, or are you happy to say I'm selling to Belgium, and you end up with selling 6,422 euros of sales, saying Belgium is on my list. We don't believe in that. We think if you do it properly, and international sales is not about shifting boxes. International sales is about developing a sustainable business and a profitable business in a foreign market like Belgium. So you need one of the top 5 to create that minimum volume, and on top of that you can start developing or supplying the other multiples. But I'll go into details on each of them to give you an idea what that means. Colruyt Group, market leader, and it consists of let's say 3-4 main supermarket chains. When you talk about Colruyt, it's predominantly the first one, the 255 stores, which is called Colruyt Lowest Prices. I'll explain what that means in fact. And maybe a quick side note, you can see integrated franchised. That's an important thing to know. In Belgium, the market is very much dominated now by franchise stores, meaning a store is owned by the shopkeeper, the shop manager. They have a contract with a central headquarters, but in the end, they run the show as they think they should run the show, their store. They have a contract with headquarters. Is it Delhaize? Is it Spar, for example, or is it Carrefour? They have an agreement where they need to respect, in principle, 90 to 95% of the category management or the planograms, but besides that, they do what they want. This is a very important trend which has put a little bit the Belgian retail scene upside down over the last 24 months, because Delhaize was mixed, a number of integrated stores and a number of franchise stores. They have all been sold to the independents, which means that Delhaize doesn't have any integrated stores anymore. Why do I say that has an impact? That means you come as a supplier, you have an agreement, and especially the smaller ones have an agreement with headquarters, doesn't guarantee that your product will find its way to each individual store. And it means you need somebody local often to work on the individual stores one by one, which is quite an intensive job. Having said that, you still have your agreements with central quarters, and I'm sure Mieke has experience from her background as well. That is an ongoing battle with headquarters, whilst you don't have the full guarantee that they've implemented in store. Again, that depends, of course, from category to category and brand to brand. Coca-Cola doesn't have a problem with central listing and different and decentralized deliveries, but for smaller brands, that's the challenge. Colruyt, going back to that, Colruyt has fully integrated stores, the Colruyt lowest prices, and OK, which are their smaller outlets, all and organic stores, Bioplanet, they are all integrated. From the franchised, that's the Colruyt retail partners, it's called, with 2 fascias, Spar and Alvo. When we talk about Delhaize in Belgium, or Ahold Delhaize, we predominantly talk about AD Delhaize stores at 347 under the Delhaize banner. Having said that, Albert Heijn has a roughly 75-80 stores already in Belgium, but in the perspective, but those decisions are predominantly taken in Germany, what do I say, in Holland. And then you've got Carrefour, which has a mixture of integrated and franchise stores, and is the only one with hypermarkets. Our market is a market of supermarkets, meaning 2,500 square meters on average. Looking in more detail to Colruyt, market leader with different fascias, and here you can see a few pictures of how those stores look like. The most important one is, as I said, fully on the top left-hand corner, Colruyt lowest prices. 255 of those. That's 80%. If you supply Colruyt, that will be roughly 80% of your turnover. They have 6,000 lines in store, so they are only interested in the hard runners. They are not interested in a range of 8 products within kind of assortment. They will tell you, we are interested in the top 2, top 3, and not in the tail. Closely related to that is OK. OK also integrated, and they can a bit be considered as the small Colruyt. The small Colruyt with and a focus more on convenience and fresh products. Colruyt is the typical store where people shop once a week. They do even everything for you to come back. In other words, there is no express checkout because they want big baskets to roll out on their caddies. So if you enter the Belgian market, it is OK Colruyt where you need to score. I'm sure there will be some people in the audience who are dealing with organic products, and in that context, Bioplanet is a very interesting and exciting place to be. That is definitely where I would advise you to look at if you have an organic proposition. Is Bioplanet 35, a good rotation, 35 stores across Belgium. And the others are Cru and Alvo, less important to mention. What is the strategy? And I will talk about the Colruyt lowest prices. They offer every product the cheapest in the market. They are not a price breaker. They will not disturb the market, but they will always be 0.5% cheaper than anywhere else in Belgium. They adapt that daily. So if tomorrow Deleuze sells a product at €2, you will find that, and that product, the same product would be in Colruyt, they will retail it at €1.99. If Deleuze decides to take more margin, or for whatever reason they increase it to €2.10, overnight Colruyt will follow and put it at €2.09. So it also works in the other way. Colruyt decides to go on promotion, Deleuze decides to go on promotion, goes from €2 to €1.75. Colruyt will follow to €1.74. €1.74. But then, of course, you have a problem because Colruyt hasn't planned that. Colruyt is losing margin, and Colruyt is not interested to pay that all margin. So it will come back to you as a supplier. They will come back to you and ask for, what are we going to do? Have a loss of margin. How are we going to compensate? Which means that Colruyt is a retailer where you need to be careful how you handle it, how you structure your promotions, how you deal with the rest of the market with promotional planning. Don't go in naive, because it can be a very expensive exercise. I also mentioned most expensive retailer for the supplier is not only for that, because their margins are slightly lower, what they request, but there is the fact of listing fees. If you want to be listed in Colruyt, you need to put listing fees on the table without any sales guarantee, besides the fact that they will take your product and keep it on shelf for 1 year. Everybody communicates, of course, to the consumer, Colruyt included, and their promotions, they are valid for 2 weeks. The rest of the market is 1 week, Colruyt is for 2 weeks. But it's a very efficient retailer. If you deal with them, you know exactly where you will be, in how many stores. They can tell you daily in how many stores there is an out of stock, or where they will they are weaker, etc. And for you, it is one drop, one depot. So that makes it quite efficient. And also in terms of e-commerce, they have a system of collect and go, which is quite efficient and the biggest in Belgium. So you order online and you pick your products up at certain depots across the country near the shops. Deleuze or Ahold Deleuze. In this context, Deleuze is the original Belgian retailer, existing for around 150 years. But that was merged with Albert Heijn some small 10 years ago into the Ahold Deleuze group. Both retailers operate separately and are officially competitors, whilst of course there are certain synergies behind the scenes which are happening. But there are officially Chinese walls between the two companies. Having said that, our advice is, if you deal with Belgium and Holland, always be careful how you quote Albert Heijn and Deleuze separately, because it could backfire at you at a certain point in time. Albert Heijn in Belgium has a small office, but in fact all major decisions also about assortments, etc., are taken in Holland. So dealing with Albert Heijn Belgium starts in fact by trying to be listed in Albert Heijn Holland. So Deleuze is the most important one in this context. I already explained to you the difference since the franchise is taking over the retailer, and they've got a number of different formats, predominantly related now to the size of the shop. So the AD de Leize, that's the supermarket, all franchised. They have got 347 like those, 2,500 to 3,500 square meters. Then you've got the local shops, smaller in size, called the proxy, de Leize, and the on the go, the forecourts, so the shopping goes, which are far more convenience outlets, again smaller. And it is important as a supplier, you think, of course, you want to be in the larger ones, but you also need to think as a supplier that do you have the offer for the smaller ones? Meaning, for example, is your carton not big enough, not too big, and should you not adapt in that way? And then Albert Heijn. Albert Heijn, as I said, predominantly coming from Holland, and they are the price disturber, I would say, in the market, and as such, helping de Leize to a certain extent to annoy Colruyt with their price setting. But that is a story on its own for an hour. Strategy of de Leize is far more than the leading retailer, the most foodie retailer. They focus on the health, like Nutri-Score, as we mentioned. And that's important. I said earlier on that Belgium is less promotion sensitive, but since Albert Heijn merged with de Leize, their promotional strategy is far more aggressive, and they run 1+1 free promotions in the market. Why do I mention it? If you would start working with de Leize or start talking to de Leize to get a listing, you almost need to include that in your promotional package, definitely in year one, that you will offer a 1+1 promotion. It's almost a condition in order to be taken seriously. They're very strong in private label. So for them, it's really either an A brand or a private label. Weekly promotions. They've got a glossy magazine, and they've got also a department, MMD, which is their own media agency where you can decide on promotions in store with wobblers, with demonstrations, with screen advertising, etc. A separate department means they just found another way of making an income from the supplier. Logistic, very simple, one depot, and a very transparent buying structure. Your first contact is the category manager. Carrefour, it's a mixed story about Carrefour. Everybody knows Carrefour because they operate across Europe. French in origin group, which took over a Belgian group 25 years ago. And Carrefour has also different formats, but is struggling every year. So they've got good years, they've got bad years. Their strategy is not that clear. It's not the most transparent retail, I would say, in terms of strategy, etc. They've got hypermarkets still, with 40 stores, fully integrated, 6,000, 7,000 square meters, with quite an important non-food department, which makes it more difficult for Carrefour, because non-food, with the media marks, with the decathlons, etc., are definitely undermining the non-food department of a Carrefour. That hypermarket model is a bit dated, in all fairness. And the question is, will that be able to survive over time? And then they've got their supermarkets, which are around 350. Part of it is still fully owned in the integrated stores, and the rest are franchised. Again, the market expects that over time they will be turned into franchise stores as well. And then they've got their convenience outlets with the small Carrefour Express, which are doing quite well, in fact. The strategy is a bit less clear than at others. Colruyt is price, de Leize is more the foodie one, and Carrefour is very much A brands and promotion driven. They have their usual promotions like everybody, also Regie Media, and it's 2 depots where you need to deliver your products. The overall Carrefour has quite a heavy structure and not that stable, so it's not the easiest one to deal with. But easy or not easy, that's a fact of life, and we just need to adapt. Private label. So some of you are focusing on your brand. Private label, mentioned earlier on, 41% of the sales in value are in private label, and we see clearly the same in the market here with a 3-tier approach, meaning there is a premium segment, there is the mainstream segment, and there is the value segment. The value segment was created, like in many markets, to compete with the Aldi's and the Lidl's. The mainstream was there as a copy of the A brand, and then the premium segment was a bit of a copy of what they've seen in the UK with Taste of Inspiration, with Tesco. Make the difference of Sainsbury. The top tier, there's not a lot happening with that. It's still there in Carrefour and Delhaize, but limited, and it's clearly not a focus. The value end is being faded out. So Delhaize is completely stopping with the 365 brand. So what you see in store is in fact using up the existing stock of packaging because they're all moving under the Delhaize brand. Colruyt is also reducing their everyday offer, but it will remain to a certain extent. So what is clear that in terms of private label, the focus is on the brand Carrefour, the brand Delhaize, and the brand Boni for Colruyt. And then there is also an organic offer with a specific private label. But private label is quite important, especially in Delhaize and Colruyt. In Carrefour, it is very much under the influence of the French. So you could have an extension of an offer from France under private label, but their strategy is less prominent, as I would say, as Delhaize or Colruyt. A segment not to be ignored is the hard discounters. You've got 2 players, Aldi and Lidl. Aldi is Aldi North in Belgium. They are the longest in the market and have a kind of a stable market share. Lidl is the newcomer and is growing predominantly because of new openings as well. They're a bit of a catch-up situation. As you can see, there are still more Aldi shops than Lidl. But Lidl has a market share just below 9%, and Aldi is for years already, fluctuating around 10-11% market share. With a limited assortment, quite prominent and quite performing in terms of rate of sale, of course. But that's not different to Aldi or Lidl in other markets. Lidl has the intention to become a bit less hard discounter and more mainstream retailer, also in their offer. But having said that, they focused a lot over the last few years on fresh and chilled, which makes the stores nicer, but it had a major impact on their P&L. So Lidl has been losing money in the market. But they are, to say it with a cliche, if you talk to Delhaize, in every 10 words they will mention the word Lidl. So Delhaize is very much looking at what Lidl is doing and trying to react to that. Aldi is the more well-established, I would say, and accepted hard discounter. Lidl is the one which attracts most of the attention. And both have done clearly an upgrade of their stores. So it's a nicer shopper environment. Then there is, and that's more to complete the picture, there are other multiples in the market which are often operating more regionally or smaller. I wanted to give you the complete picture. That's why they're included in the presentation, but I don't want to put too much time on that. But as you can see, for example, the Louis Delhaize group, there are Belgium is a market with too many shops, too many supermarkets, too many shops. So there is a rationalization process taking place, and I'm sure it will not stop yet. So we've got too many shops per 1,000 inhabitants, which of course has an impact on the profitability of that shop, has an impact on the rotation of the products, etc. So what we've seen over the last 2 years is Cora, Match, Smatch, etc. All those stores have disappeared. Those sites have been taken over by competitors like Colruyt, for example. Daily Traiteur, which is a more upmarket chain, has been taken over by Colruyt. Delhaize has taken the Louis Delhaize proximity shops, etc. So there's a lot happening in the market. Intermarché, well, big dynamic group in France. Only in the south, in the French-speaking part, and they are growing. They've taken over the supermarkets from Mesdag, which were part of the Carrefour group. So around 83 shops came into the Intermarché, which had a major impact on the market share of Intermarché. So the biggest grower to watch out for is Intermarché in the market. Lambrechts is to complete the picture, and Jumbo is coming from Holland, 37 stores, but not that successful, and only in the north. And then you have also some outlets which, I mean, 20 years ago, retail was quite transparent. You had retailers and you had food service, and nothing in between. Since there are a number of players coming into the market, which in certain categories can generate quite some volume and interesting sales. Action, for example, the originally non-food retailer from Holland, is doing quite well in Belgium. They 222 stores. We have I won't mention the brand, but one of our clients is supplying Delhaize, for example, and is also supplying Action. The sales in Action, okay, that's on a European level, but is all of a sudden six times bigger than the sales you do in Delhaize. So for you as a supplier, it is important to consider also some others. Do I have a proposition for an Action? Kruidvat, Traffic, HEMA, all non-food outlets, but they have certain food on the go or sports food proposition, etc. So again, things to bear in mind. Is that where you start, depending on your proposition? But I don't think so. And that brings me in fact to the SWOT analysis for Belgium. How do you need to rate Belgium? It's the meeting point for two main cultures in Europe. So often when you start, and big brands have done that in the past to test a new launch. Where should I go? Northern Europe, Southern Europe. If they do a test in Belgium, they have a clear view or a clear indication of where the chances could be, because we've got that Latin and German culture, and often the results of Belgium have defined the further rollout in Europe. Belgium is an open economy. Belgium is a market where producers need to export, means we import as well. So there are no barriers. It's very open. It's quite efficient in terms of logistics, as I told, a few depots only, and still a relatively high buying power. Weaknesses, it's how you look at it, but we remain a small country, for a French supplier or German supplier, Belgium is of course 1/7 of that size of the market. So you need to manage your expectations at that moment. Concentrated market means if 3 people say no, you don't have a market. High number of stores having an impact on the rotation per store, and also e-commerce is quite low. The threats entering a market, but that's not different to any other. You have an entry cost, and for brands it can be quite high, definitely in a call out. Private label is very much of a tender process where you need to be able to compete. And as we are more expensive in certain cross borders, you have competition from either Albert Heijn in the north or Shaw in the south. But let's stay positive. Let's finish positive in terms of the opportunities. Belgium is a quality market. So first quality, then price. That's, for example, clear difference with the Netherlands. Because we are a foodie nation, we are interested in good food, good taste. Don't forget that. We are in the EU. We've got quite some influence from other countries, either close by or even further. So we're quite open for that. And private label, if you have a proposition in that area, is very much is evolving positively to a private brand, in fact. So not just price, but also be different in price. I mentioned earlier on about the proposition in nuts and fruits, on which we are working at the moment. If you have a good private label proposition, you stand a chance, because brands are out in that and they want innovation in that segment. They want different things to offer to their consumer. That's why the brand is in. You need to think of private brand in terms of private label. And if there's one phrase I would like you to take along, is that Belgians live to eat and do not eat to live. Food for us is not fuel. Food for us is a part of our life, and we are constantly looking for innovations, attractive products, tasteful products, etc. That combined with a curious consumer, you can have a good chance. But think it through, do your homework. So that is in fact summarizing a little bit Belgium, the consumer, the market, etc. Then of course, because I talk about the multiples, and not everybody is immediately immediately ready to start supplying those. Therefore, what you need to do is also think to what is your best route to market. Where are you? How are you best placed to tackle that market? Do you work with a sales agent? In an ideal world, I say that to everybody, in an ideal world, you have your own office in a market. But of course, that has quite a cost, organizational, etc. And only a few companies are in a position to do so, because Belgium is too small. And you need to create sufficient scale in order to justify that. That's an easier thing to do in a market like France or Germany. But that's in an ideal world, because then you fully control your commercial process. You decide on a product proposition, on pricing, on promotion, etc. And you know the final end decision. You take the end decision. If you start with a sales agent, you lose all that commercial control. That person is often easy for you because it's no cure, no pay. If he doesn't sell anything, it doesn't cost you anything. But in terms of a strategic view of where you want to take your product, you are losing most of the control. On the other hand, then you've got the distributor taking on your products. There your control stops at the gate of their depot. You sell to them, they pay you, you deliver, and they take your product in the market. But the downside is that you don't know always where your product will end, at what pricing your product will end, what promotional activity will be done. Will this harm your brand? Will this be different to what you do in your home market, etc.? And then in between a local subsidiary, etc., is to work with somebody where you are the supplier. You are the supplier to the Delhaize and the Colruyts of this world, but you work with people locally who can only who help you on the ground, but you take the final decision. Why did I put that slide in? Because I want you to think also what is the best approach for you. As I said in the start of the webinar, everybody wants to sell, and that's normal. And who am I to decide what is best for your brand? If you feel I'm happy to sell 20,000 euros of goods, I don't know where they end, but it's profitable. I'm making some money, and I see my contact or my partner once a year at an exhibition. Fine. If you have more long-term ambitions, if you want to build your brand to a certain level, then it's important you think how you approach that. And a lot of companies start with a distributor, come then at a certain point to a saturation point, and then try to take control. That's what has been happening or is happening in a market constantly. We've had that with a brand called, for example, Jordan's. Jordan's was a breakfast cereal, worked 20 years with a Dutch importer for Benelux, and had a good distribution. They were in all the multiples. Now, at a certain point in time, they pulled out of the distributor, said, we are going to do it ourselves. We are going to supply the multiples directly with some support. In that case, that was Greenseed. And in 2 years' time, we doubled the volume. That was not because of Greenseed. I hope we contributed, of course, a bit of it. But that was predominantly because there was the focus from the brand and the company to think through what do we want to do with the brand, what NPD will we offer the retailer. We are on regular contacts with the buyer. We plan promotions. So there was the focus of the company to drive the brand to. They knew what Kellogg's was doing, what Nestlé was doing, and they adapted to that. And as such, as I said, they doubled the sales. 20 years of good sales with the good distribution, but in 2 years' time, they managed to double the sales purely because there was the focus on, there was the control on. And by adding this slide, is more for you to think, where do you want to be in X number of years? What is your ambition? And based on that, think, what should be my way to enter the Belgian market? Advice 1, do your homework. Know what the competition is doing, where can you be different? Because if you know what the competitor is doing, you can also define, my product is more healthy, my product has a better quality, better taste, my price setting is better, or if your price setting is more expensive, then you need to make sure that you can justify that. Why? So that is very important. Do your homework, build your story, focus on your USP and where can I make the difference, and then the sales process starts. Because at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants, is to be successful, to sell, and develop what we aim, or what we always advise. The objective should be to develop a sustainable and profitable business. Sustainable meaning you sell today, you sell next year, and you're still there in 5 years' time. And profitable, you're there to make money. Doesn't make sense to say we're selling and the margins are not good, etc. And you would be surprised, and I can really confirm that to you, you would be surprised how many companies don't really know what their P&L is on, in this case, the Belgian market. It goes in the pot of international, and it looks like it's good, etc. So again, the objective should be that you're there long term and have a profitable business. So that's of course the downside of a webinar. I don't hear reactions, I don't see people, but I hope this give you a bit of an introduction for you to come to Belgium, to be present at Tavola. Because at Tavola, what I can add is, at Tavola, it's not only an exhibition where you can meet those buyers. I told you about the Conrad Deleuze's or the bioplanets. They will be there, they will be around. But there will also be distributors walking around. And more importantly, a lot of those distributors will have a stand at Tavola. So if your intention is to find a partner, for example, as a distributor for the Belgian market, my advice is definitely go also leave your stand for some time and go around the show and look at which distributors could fit you, could be a fit for your brand, and open a discussion. But I mean, that's Tavola March. So I would say, Patrick, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Philippe, for your